Let's get this train rolling here. Hold on. All right, welcome to our member call on Microsoft Power Platform at Heineken, and a big thank you to Andrew Sayers for taking the time to prepare this. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Andrew Sayers. I work currently for Heineken in the Netherlands, based in just outside Leiden, close to one of the breweries, and I'm a digital specialist. I just joined in June this year, and today I'm going to talk you through how we're using the Power Platform, specifically Power Apps, within the organization, and give you some insights, also some thoughts and experiences I had. I've also worked with Power Apps and Office 365 for the last 3 to 5 years. So I'll just get started. So you'll see the first slide. Somebody mentioned there's all these solar panels. You see the wind turbines as well. Some interesting facts about Heineken. Most of the production sites in the Netherlands are run on green energy. So they have solar panels and wind farms in the area. So they're quite green. So let's begin with the presentation. So just a quick quote that this next 5 years, 500 million more apps will be created, and that's more than all the apps built in the last 40 years. This was a prediction by a company called IDC. It was posted within one of the Microsoft blogs. So yeah, it's going to be. People have been saying it's the start of a revolution. Lots of people will be able to create their own apps. And this will cause an exponential leap in the number of apps that we are going to be developing. A quick background on Heineken. You may recognize some of the brands here along the bottom. I don't know if it's the picture's big enough, but you've got Amstel. You've also got some Italian beers, Sol, Strongbow, Newcastle Brown. We are operating in over 160 countries. We also work with some partnerships with breweries. So there's some, Heineken is a well-known brand, but we also do lots of other brands as well. And Żywiec in Poland as well is also one of our brands as well. So just to give you an idea, I work in an operating company within Heineken called HNS. It's actually Heineken Netherlands Supply. So basically we have 3 breweries in Zoeterwoude, Den Bosch and Veerle. And they are, the one in Zoeterwoude provides mostly alcohol or beer to other operational companies within the Netherlands. But we also do ship abroad a certain percentage of our beer as well. So Zoeterwoude is the main brewery where they brew Heineken. Den Bosch is doing more specialty beers. And then the Veerle brewery is doing specifically brand. You may have heard of the beer called Brand. That's brewed in that particular brewery. Just one fact as well. Every year here in the Netherlands, we brew 18 million hectolitres of beer. And just a fact here is that if you would line it up in bottles, it would go around the world 9 times. It's unbelievable. I couldn't get my head around some of the figures. It's amazing how much beer is produced in the breweries here in the Netherlands. Another quick fact is that the production lines are very much automated. You do not see many people on the shop floor, as it were. It's all automated. It's all, as you can see in the pictures, all these lines and everything is automated. So if you actually do go on, everything is automated. So it's a very, very efficient operating. Quickly, introduction to Power Platform. You may have heard of this before, but basically Microsoft term it as the 4 A's. So under the Power Platform, you have you can analyze with Power BI. So this is where you can actually get insights from all the data, all the inputs that you put in. Just to add that the Power Platform is part of the Office 365 suite. It's on top of Excel and things like this. It's a suite of extra software which has come up in the last couple of years, just for people who are not aware. So you have Power BI, which will give you the analyzation. You get Apps, which is Power Apps, where you can actually build your own applications with buttons that are linking doing workflows, etc. like this. You have the Automate section, which is run by Power Automate, and this is a workflow engine. They call it the glue that binds Office 365. So basically, you can, from Power Automate, have a trigger from an email, have a trigger from something in Excel or another system, and then it starts to do approvals or different activities, maybe in SharePoint as well. Then finally, you have Assist, which is where you've got Power Virtual Agents. This is where you can do chatbots and AI. Just to give you also a bit more of what is underneath or behind the Power Platform, you have the modules I was just talking about, or the different aspects, but beneath it, you have the Common Data Service, which is like the Microsoft, as it were, database engine. You have an AI builder, which is based in Azure, and where you can actually start to do AI integrated with your workflows or with your apps. Also Power BI. You have portals, which are more to do with external, making your apps available externally. And then you have the data connectors. Now, data connectors, I think there's over 300 or 400 data connectors, which are, as it were, ways of connecting your apps or your workflows with other Office 365 elements or apps, but also other third party, for example, SAP, maybe and other applications as well. So there's lots of these apps. You can also build your own custom connector, which means if you have a specific legacy system that you want to connect to, you could possibly build a data connector, which would then enable you to connect your Power Apps or Power Automate to that legacy application. If anything's not clear or you have a question, please don't hesitate to raise it as we go through, because there's lots going through and maybe there's some people who are not familiar. I'm happy to answer any questions on that. So I just had a thought as I was going through this presentation is what I think Microsoft are trying to address here is a lot of, I've experienced, and maybe some other people have experienced it in the past, Excel was where a lot of people did automations, customizations. I've come across lots of departments where they all rely on one particular Excel spreadsheet, which has got loads and loads of sheets, Visual Basic, also Visual macros and all sorts of things, and it's running their finance system or it's running their databases or something. And I think what Microsoft saw is that how can we bring that into the modern day within Office 365? And I think that's why they bought Power Apps, because you can still do the same things you do within Excel, customizations, using company data, automation, but it's much more in a modern interface. You've got dragging and dropping, you can do buttons. But what the interesting thing is that the programming language that they use for in Power Apps, which is called PowerFX, is actually very much, they say, based on Excel formulas. So people who are familiar with making these customizations within Excel should find using Power Automate and Power Apps a bit, not too much of a steep learning curve, because it's using the functions or very similar functions to what you'd use in Excel. So I thought I'd just share with you, just to give you an idea of where Microsoft, I think, are looking at to address the problem. Here in Power Apps at HNS in Heineken, we have about 40 apps that have been built in the last year or so, which are being used with either in safety, production, or learning and development. And what we're doing is looking at how can we manage those apps. So, for example, we have 40 apps. Out of those 40 apps, for example, we have a safety app, which is on a mobile device, and once a month, a safety officer will go around the production hall and look and do a survey on, okay, where is this unsafe position? What is an unsafe machine? They'll take the device, they'll run the app on the mobile, they'll take a photo of the unsafe activity, they'll make a note, they click submit, it goes into a system like a SharePoint list, where then it will also automatically notify people. Further on, you have every month a Power BI dashboard, which is then pulling up all that information of the safety checks to say, okay, how safe are we? Okay, what's the trends and things like this. So you have a whole cycle of the Power App that delivers the the registration of the incident or the activity. Then you maybe have a workflow behind it, which will then notify people of an unsafe situation. Finally, you have Power BI, which will then give you the reporting and the trends. And of course, it can be for a year, couple of years. Once you have that information, Power BI just pulls up the information automatically. In the production side, we have several Power Apps that are running for when we have drivers who come into the organization to drop off or load. We have a waiting room. In that waiting room is a screen, which is a touch screen, which is running a Power App where the driver will come in. They'll enter their details, their unloading or loading number. That's running on a Power App. Then the people in the control room are also running a Power App, which is also then looking at the information that's coming up. We have a waiting room app with like all the numbers of the people coming in and their license plates. And then it tells you, okay, now you can go to Barley 1 or Barley 2 to get your to be processed. And once that's processed, the control room will then go into their system and say, okay, we've accepted this, we've got the paperwork, we've got the numbers, and then they put it into the warehouse management system. So we've got a whole cycle using a couple of Power Apps to manage the unloading and loading of trucks that come into the brewery. Finally, in learning and development, we have a whole Power App which is helping with the training matrix. So basically, somebody says, I want to learn, to do a first aid course. So they go into the Power App, they register their interest in becoming a first aider. This will then get notified to the training or safety officer. They'll approve or reject it, and then that gets put into the person's training profile, which is then later uploaded into SAP through a different system. So within the 40 apps we have here, I'm just giving you a bit of a taste of what is happening in those different areas. From those 40 apps, we want to manage them, IT, because what happens is when those apps will go wrong, somebody's going to say, well, who's going to fix it? And what happens is normally IT is the first port of call. So what we're doing here at Heineken and HNS is we're creating a sort of a service model where IT is responsible for particular managed apps, where we made an agreement with the business to have an SLA and also to give them some idea of how quick we'll respond to it, etc. And what we're doing is we're taking a review of the current 40 apps and we're having an intake funnel where we basically go through existing apps and ask some questions. For example, if it's a new app, is it suitable? Is there a new requirement? Is it suitable for Power Apps? So one of the first things we do is if there's a new solution requested, we'll do some checks. Is it really suitable for Power Apps? Because maybe it's either too critical or it's just not the benefit that it gives the business may not be worth it for us to invest our time. How critical is it? What type of SLA are they looking at? If they're looking at a 24/7 SLA, that may not be possible because, for example, at the moment, I'm the only support person in the company. So I'm only here 9 to 5, 5 days a week. So we have to look at that sort of support. Also, the business has to be committed because they'll need to give the time and energy to help with either developing the app or supporting the app with functional support. And then we would create an agreement that the app will need to be moved into a managed environment. And without going into too much detail, we actually have a managed environment, which is actually a developer pipeline. So we have an acceptance and development area. And basically we do sort of almost like a professional developer cycle where we do a development cycle where we get people using it, testing it. We go into acceptance, it's approved, and then it moves on to be into production. One important thing to think about is that lots of people have the ability within Office 365 to create apps, but what's something very important is you can't get away from documentation. You still need to write some documentation because, for example, if I leave the organization, other people will need to take over. And so what I do is I write very high-level wikis where I just have a page with who are the contacts, what are the related apps, what are the related workflows, a bit of high-level process information, so that if anybody comes along after if I'm doing something else or moved in the business, at least somebody can come in and pick off where I left off. So it's very important that when you develop these apps, to have some sort of log, have some sort of documentation. Now, within the apps, what is not known or what is not really realized is that you also need to make that structured as well. Within the apps, you still need to put in like little statements, oh, this part of the program does this does this, and there's different screens within the app, and you have to also have naming conventions and meaningful labels. So if you're just starting to think about Power Apps, it's very important to think about naming conventions and yeah, how am I going to name things? How are we going to agree on a naming convention for when we're developing apps? So if somebody else comes in to take over, they at least have some idea of, oh, that screen's for this or this screen's for this. And it's illogical. They may not understand the whole concept, but it's easy for them to jump in. My experience of Power Apps, the pros, it's a very quick, short delivery time. I can do a proof of concept in a week, if not days. It integrates very well with Office 365. It's now they have native Teams apps, which you can develop within Teams, and there's no need for a pro developer for basic apps. What I would point out, though, is it's very important, not just the technology, but to have a digital leadership and guidance that understands what this benefit can do, and also give guidance to your departments about where they would see this going and how they would want to use it. Also important, review and adjust your current 8 KPIs to measure the apps, because maybe you just don't want an app to replace an FTE, but maybe it's to do with getting a quicker onboarding cycle. Maybe your onboarding cycle is a week, but this app will make it in 24 hours. So you have to look at your FTE, your KPI, and maybe have other KPIs to measure the success of the apps. It can be a steep learning curve for more complicated solutions, and you may need to work with pro developers. So for somebody who's interested, they can create that very quickly. But as you go on and become more mature, I think it becomes much more of a team game where you need to utilize the functions and groups within the organization, and it becomes much more of a cross-functional activity, and possibly even with a third-party contractor developer. Key takeaways. This is the beginning of a revolution. I think it is. It's just gonna take off, and with all this digital transformation, also COVID, I think it's gonna go very far. Very important that these type of automations provide an effortless experience to show their value and potential. You must think about your data model. You can't get away with whatever apps you create. It's very important to think of your data model, because if your foundation is not very good, your app in the future will not be very robust and sustainable. As I said, it's not just the technology, strategy, culture, and mindset are very important as well from the organization. Don't always fit the app to the process. Maybe you can do the process differently. I've had some examples where we were asked to do a solution and the process wasn't documented very well. So we had to go back and document it. But sometimes you can start, well, okay, we have the app, it can do all this. Let's maybe look at doing a different process with it. Very important. Last comment, first create a minimum viable product, something that communicates the core ideas but uses the fewest possible resources. Don't start and think you want to build, I don't know, you want to build the biggest thing ever. Start with the smallest thing, start with the core activity. And maybe my next slide will give you a bit more insight into that. Here, this is how to create good is good enough. With Power Apps, just do good is good enough, because over time, as you become more mature, you begin to understand what you're looking for, and then you can build on it. Power Apps are dynamic and organic. They will keep growing. So when you build the basic process, you can just keep every 6 months adding to it, improving it. Or if it's finished its functionality, you can stop it. So I'm sort of closing on this. So this is some important links. I think one thing you can do is Microsoft provides some great tools. One particularly great tool is the Microsoft Power Platform Center of Excellence. This will give you a lot of tools, including a dashboard from Power BI that will actually let you give you insight into who's building apps within your organization and how often they're used. So I'm almost coming to the end of the presentation. I'm looking very closely at the time because I'd like to have some time for questions. I've rushed through a lot, but I just wanted to give you kind of a taster and some thoughts of what we've done. So it's almost 25 minutes past the hour. So I think I'm going to stop there. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
That works. Thank you very much, Andrew. Really appreciate your perspective into this. I was quite surprised at the beginning of this season after the summer holidays, meeting again members in person. I think it was in Oslo. We had one of our not very technical Norwegian members saying that I don't think they called it a revolution, but I think they called it definitely a game changer. And so I was really happy when you came forward and said, you were willing to provide a glimpse behind the scenes and the progress you've made so far at Heineken. In the meantime, we have a little bit of Q&A on the chat. Let's start with some questions by David. Do you want to just phrase it yourself, David?
Yeah, hi, thank you. My question was about the how you are managing the movement between the environments. You mentioned that you have the pipeline set up in your organization, and I'm finding this quite hard to move the Canvas application between the environments. So maybe you can share some tips, tricks with us.
You're using solutions, I take it? Are you using solutions within your DevOps pipeline?
Yeah, we are using the solutions, but the environment variables are just not working for us. And we are just manually sometimes changing the data sources, as we are not using the Dataverse so much, and then it is problematic.
Yep, in our particular setup, we haven't had much experience with using the environment variables, so I can't give you any tips on that. But certainly, I could ask someone. We have a federated model where the central Heineken group are managing the environments, and we are, as a sort of an opco, operational company, we are using it with them. So they're the ones who are actually running the environment. So I could ask them and the question for you.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And then Gurdeep, over to you.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful presentation. One of the questions that I had was around the governance side of it, because it's an enterprise solution, which is Power Apps, right? So, and then it is like an Office 365 product, which is available for everyone. And then the risk always comes is that anyone at every corner of the organization start developing apps, which is not centrally governed and controlled, which means that it turns out to be another spider web solution similar to VBA macros, where you have thousands and thousands of macros lying with nobody being aware of what it is. So do we have any controls that you have at HNS that we can definitely look at? And secondly, because you can definitely control licenses through AD groups and all that stuff, but a lot of times that's not viable because you can't just excluded out of the overall proportion of people not having access to some and some having access to a little bit of them.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. What we've done at Heineken is that we've limited the connectors that people can access because, for example, you have a lot of connectors and they can access Twitter, Instagram, all sorts of different. So what we've done is we basically limited the connectors to only be available in the default environment for Office 365 connectors, so Outlook and things like this. That's one way of stopping people using things that may have an impact on the business by exposing data. On the other hand, as I mentioned, as I have on the slide here, the Power Platform Center of Excellence kit, that gives you a Power BI dashboard where you can actually have insight into who's developing what. So that would also give you a bit of oversight into who's developing what, and also whether the connectors they're using are safe. But as I say, there's the other option of having governance where you limit or block certain connectors.
Great. Thanks for the tip.
I think I've had Power Platform, Power App governance come up in a few group meetings too, and I think one member shared like a Homer Simpson walking backwards when we talked about Power Platform governance. Any other questions, comments, reflections? We have a minute or two left if anybody wants to jump in.
We'll take the chance with one question. Who are the people developing Power Apps at Heineken? Is it the people on the business side which have been developed macros before, or who are the guys who are really starting to put up the first versions?
In where I'm working, what we've done is that we had somebody who was working in my position before. They were actually making the apps, but that's what I'm doing. Also, my role is I'm making apps for the business when they come for asking questions. But it gets to the point where if I've got 40 apps to manage, then my developing time is going to be less because I'm also dealing with the issues from the other 40 apps that I've got to look after. So what we see is that having a third party, like a contractor that you work with, is becoming more of the, how can I say, yeah, for certain things that are more complex, we're going to be working with a third party because they can then deliver something in a week, whereas because they're focusing on that particular app. Whereas me, I have many different roles. I'm also doing the service sort of delivery as well with the organization, plus any incidents and also the documentation. So that's where, so I think a third party is what we're doing here at Heineken. We're getting third party in to do certain apps. But yes, there's also an element regards to individuals. You have to find people who have the how can I say, the interest and the who want to take the time and do it, because a lot of people are too busy with their job and they don't have the time. But if you can find certain people who we have in Heineken also who do that, then pick up on those people by using Yammer or Facebook Workspace and get the community going. That's one way of also helping each other out. Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. I think on that note, we made it just on time. Like I said at the beginning, I will share the slides and the comments. There was also a follow-up that Andrew will look into, and I'll make sure to get that into the summary as well. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Really appreciate it.